And I have Thor Swenson here. He's the partner and managing director of Lagome in international consulting, focusing on human capital, change management, and organizational design. He has led talent acquisition, training, leadership development, and change management within a multi-million-dollar organizations. And I have Yash Voltaire. He is the consultant focused on human capital side of mergers, acquisitions, and integrations. He has a degree in industrial organizational psychology and prior experience with the Big Four. His focus is developing scalable and sustainable organizational design and talent strategies that have set organizations up for multiple years of success. With that said, you guys, I just want to remind my audience, if you have any questions for my panelists, please do me a favor. Please put in the Q&A down below right there. Try not to put it in the chat box. Chat box gets a little cluttered there. And so we want to make sure that we leave ample time for your questions. And what we'll do is we'll take breaks probably every 15 to 20 minutes, and we'll go back and look at the Q&A and find out if you guys have any questions, burning questions that for my panelists, my micro panel here. But with that said, I kind of want to open it up really broadly. So we know 2021 has been, well, 2020 has been a really tough year for a lot of people. Some good, some not so great. So what is the career and job mindset that people need to have going into 2021? I'm going to start off with entry level, and Oscar, I'm going to start off with you because you just did that Clubhouse presentation with all those college and millennials. So take it away, Oscar. You got any tips for those entry level folks that are looking for their next remote job opportunity?
Yeah, definitely. Cheryl, thank you for putting this amazing talk again. You always put together top-notch events. And Yash and Thor, it's a pleasure to be with you here for the first time. So first of all, I believe that here in 2021, look at the situation that we're in still right now, right? I'm in California, the Bay Area specifically, and shelter in place, a lot of restaurants. It's just takeout, and we're still hurting. And I think what we're going to see here probably over the next 6, 7, 8 months is, unfortunately, more and more companies in the service sector lay off some folks. I have a relative that works for the fish market, and they just laid off 80 plus of their employees. Laid off, not furlough. And so that effect is just a trickle effect. What I tell people is we need to be doing the attitude that we need to take is the same attitude that we should take all the time, and that is always be a problem solver as an employee. Whether we're in the situation that we're in or when the economy was good and eventually the economy is going to pick back up, never lose sight that your client is your employer. And if you always look at it from the perspective is, how can I add value? How can I better the situation, my job, etc.? Stop thinking I can employ you folks. That's part of the reason why we're in this situation. Some of us is because we only think of an employee and we clock in, clock out virtually, and instead always look at how to be more efficient, to employer brings greater value. And you know what? Sometimes that employer, because it happened to me when I used to work in tech, company shut down, it was completed out of my hands. But guess what? I built that reputation, that brand, that network, those skill sets that I was able to only be out of a job for 6 weeks. So again, that's what I recommend, whether you're entry level or whether you are sitting behind a mahogany desk. Do those things.
Hey, Yash, what do you think about the mindset or going into 2021 for mid-level career folks?
Yeah, so like taking this entry-level piece and going one step further, think about the experience that you have gained so far. You've been in the workforce for X amount of time. You have a set of skills that are extremely valuable. And while it might not be a direct job fit for something that you're looking for, there is experience that's going to be valuable for where the next year to 5 years is going to take you. And make sure you're not discounting that. Make sure you're thinking about what's going to set you up for success, and do not discount the experience that you have. There's a lot of people that are looking for that experience. There's a lot of people that don't have that right now. It makes you more competitive in that very market.
Okay, Thor, what about our senior and executive level C-suite folks?
I think it builds on what Oscar and Yasha both said. And I think truly for the more senior and C-level suite people, it's a paradigm shift. I think it's, taking into account that it's a whole new ballpark out there, a whole new world. And the old isn't the same as it is today. You're going to have to change your mindset. You're going to have to be forward thinking. There may be roles that, previously you wouldn't even thought about, jumping into that, taking that step back in order to take that step forward. But it is such a competitive market out there right now with, where unemployment sits at the moment. And as Oscar alluded to, we don't know what's going to happen next. I mean, service industry is probably the biggest hit right now with these fluctuations of shutdowns. Then you look at the political climate of what's going on right now. Who knows what the future holds? So I think it's truly a paradigm shift. And also going back just in general for anybody currently in the job market. I know we spoke to this back in, maybe it was one of the May or June sessions, right as we were kind of in the heat of the pandemic. And one of the things we really harped on was knowing that you're not alone out there. I think a lot of people beat themselves up and think, woe is me, I'm in a terrible place. When if you look across the board, everybody is feeling it in some way. Even if you have a job, it may be an increased workload. If you're out of a job, you're not the only one that's out of a job. Everybody's dealing with something in a different way. So it's taking those mental health days, taking a step away from the computer if it's a job search, taking a day off, do something you really enjoy, refresh your batteries and get back to it, because you never know what the next day holds.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people are struggling right now because a lot of jobs are on the line. So let me go back to the nitty gritty stuff of layoffs and pay cuts during remote work. For example, a lot of people are thinking that they're going to get laid off because they're working from home for a while. Positions and budgets are shrinking and headcount is dwindling. So, how can employees improve their value while they're working from home? Because obviously they're not getting the face time that they once did when they were in the office. Um, so, any tips and strategies, Oscar, on that?
So yeah, there's a couple of things that come to my mind here. Is number one, um, when you're working remote, communication is even more vital because think about when we're in the office, right? We're get up, go to the coffee machine, and on the way back or the snack room, you see Thor. Hey, what's up, dude? How's it going? What you do this weekend? We don't. That doesn't happen anymore. We have to be very deliberate in me reaching out to him, checking in, et cetera. So I think number one, communication is very, very important, that we initiate that communication. And when I say initiate the communication, obviously, whether it's email, whether it's whatever, Slack, Microsoft Teams, or Google Chat, whatever it is that you're using, at least staying in touch. The other thing too is that I think it's important that we keep track of our activity and our accomplishments. I remember having a job where literally every Friday I just sent an email out with a summary of my activities and accomplishments, and it was just kind of like, hey, just want to let you know, what's going on, we're on track, et cetera, and so forth. Oftentimes I didn't get a response back from my boss, but I know he saw it. And then the other thing too, folks, and this kind of goes to what Thor was saying earlier about just that mental break and so forth. Folks, realize that when the Titanic was sinking, there was that dude, the architect, who was like moping and crying because a ship who was invincible, unsinkable, was sinking, and the dude drowned, okay, because he stayed on that ship while everyone else is like jumping ship. I'm going to save my life. The ship that you're on, the company, you could be doing everything perfect and it's still going to sink, folks. So get off that ship.
Thor, Yash, you got anything to add on that one? How do you prove to your employer that you are worthy of sticking around and not getting
I think, I think Oscar's spot on with, you've got to do something to stand out. You got to be front and center. You don't have those cooler talks anymore. You don't get to pass by, a director's office, a VP's office, whoever it may be, and get some of that face time and be able to give them a quick update on, hey, so just left this meeting. Here's what's going on. Here's our next steps. So they know you're staying active. So a lot of people may frown upon, reply all emails. And I'm not talking about the reply all emails to the entire company where you're on a company distro and you reply all and say thanks or something like that. But, reply all emails to where it's a group of 10 or 15 people that are part of a project with your boss or maybe another senior level member that's part of that email chain. Replying all instead of just a simple reply to whoever sent the email. That way others are seeing your level of communication, that you're involved, that you're on top of things, and that you're open-minded and able to, be forward-thinking and plug in where you need to plug in.
Mm. Yeah, Yash, you got anything to include on that one?
Yeah, just one quick point there. I think so. Just kind of piling onto this once again. I think it's important to remember, like, the landscape has changed. The landscape is very different compared to the way it used to be. So one, internalize that, realize that it is different. It's not going to be the same kind of ever again. We are living in different times now, and being able to adapt and be flexible to kind of where we're at now is extremely important. And it does give you a leg up on a lot of people who are not doing that at this point in time. And it's also important to understand, you've got to understand the external circumstances, right? Like, there is, as Oscar mentioned, like the ship might be sinking no matter what. It's going to sink. What you can do is kind of within your control. But if you see that happening and you see the signs pointing to it, jump ship at that point in time. It's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do for your career. And you're better off looking for a job while you already have one than the latter.
Okay. And I assume that some people might be in this boat. How do you fight back from a pay cut because your employer tells you you're working from home or may give an excuse about budget situations? Beyond sending them weekly emails about your task load and what you're doing. Do you have any other strategies for people who might be fighting that pay cut? Because I know a lot of people had taken that pay cut because their industries are losing money. Anybody?
Okay. I can take a stab at it. It's definitely about exposure out here. There were things that you might have been doing previously that were noticed because you were in person, you were front and center, you had the right exposure at that point in time. You might not have that anymore. You might be doing exactly what you were doing previously, but you're not going to be valued the same way because it's kind of out of sight, it's out of mind. That's a negative. You have to do everything you can to kind of get that exposure back. You've got to fight for some of that. You've got to fight for some of that attention. It really is the right thing to do. You aren't taking a job away from someone else. You're kind of doing what you have to do to keep your job, and others should be doing the exact same thing, being in the same boat you're in.
Yeah, exactly. See, here's the situation, because I've been on both sides of the coin. I've been on the side where everyone, including myself and the whole team, we had to take a pay cut. Otherwise, we were not going to be around. And then I've been on the employee side. So I think, as an employee, I think it's important that you do your research and try to understand why this pay cut is happening. Is it really because, again, the company needs to take that pay cut, or is it selective? Or, to your point earlier, Cheryl, is that is it are you being targeted for that? So you got to do some research within the company, do some research with colleagues outside of that, people similar. There's a great website. It's called Google. Go on to Google and research some of this. But it's basically doing research so that you can then make your case for it, is basically what I'm getting at.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, Oscar. Don't come back spiteful. If your employer comes to you, don't turn into a negative, and become, I don't want to use the term, but the whiner, because you have to think, you've got a job, you're secure at this point. Yes, you're facing, maybe a pay reduction at this point, which Oscar and Yash have given some great points on how do you counter that. But just think, for every person that's employed, there's probably another 3 or 4 people that are standing in line waiting to take that job. So don't double down and talk yourself out of the job. Look to mitigate, what you're going through, and again, sell yourself, what you bring to the organization, how you're contributing, that true ROI that you're delivering at the end of the day.
Okay, great. By the way, shout out to Marianne. Marianne, you're getting to one of my questions, but if you could do me a favor and put in the Q&A, that would be great, because I was just about to get to your question, but I do have a few more questions before I get to that one. For those people who are in the office, like for myself, right? I was a office only person. Like they would never let me work from home unless there was a pandemic. So how does one pitch an office only job to going remote totally because of other reasons? Like, for example, they have kids and they're on FMLA leave, which is Family Medical Leave Act, for those of you guys who aren't with the acronyms. How do you basically pitch an office only job to a remote job? Yash, do you want to take this one, since I bet you've got some stories about this one?
Yeah, most definitely. So like working for a big four company and working with oil and gas clients in particular, you can imagine they tend to be a little bit more traditional in the way they do things, and they do believe in being in the office as much as possible. So the note I was making while Cheryl was saying this is pilots and tests. Like, you got to pilot this, you got to test it, got to be able to pitch the fact that you can work remotely and be just as efficient. And sometimes that might mean, you doing a lot more than you used to do previously, or having that greater exposure, bringing light to the work that you are actually doing at that point in time, especially when you're remote. I think Oscar brought this up earlier, something around just the theme of communication, which I think is going to be big for anything that's remote work related. You got to communicate a lot more than you used to previously. The stuff that was happening, what I used to call, and this is not the right phrase for it, but I used to call it kind of like your body language and your body language cues, your nonverbal communication that took place to show that you were doing work, doesn't exist anymore. So it's got to be very verbal in the form of emails, IMs, Zoom calls, whatever it might be. You just got to communicate more. But I would say it's just got to be pilots and tests. Pilot, ask if you can do it for X amount of time and show that you are capable of doing the job just as efficiently, and then take it from there. Got to go one step at a time. Don't ask to just be remote at all times. It could be can I be remote? Can I work from home 2 days a week? Take that, see how it goes, be able to perform your job. This is not only a test for yourself, but it's also a test to see if the people around you can work that way with you, because there's a chance it doesn't work out. And you might be working 2 days from home and you're not able to do your job as efficiently as you were previously. So there's a lot to consider, but pilot it out, test it out, and take it from there.
Okay, Oscar, I'm going to flip this question a little bit. What happens if it's a position that's supposed to be, an office only job, and it's on like LinkedIn or it's on monster.com or Indeed, and you don't have the job, but you want to pitch the employer that you can do this remotely? Is that something that you should do? Is that something that you can, is that a big ask? Is that something that you can do in an interview process, or absolutely not? Wait until you're employed and then go ahead and ask them and prove yourself and then ask them afterwards.
Yeah. So I'm of the fan that if you don't ask the question, you know what the answer is going to be. And so I think, explore the idea right up front. To your point earlier, kind of the way you mentioned the question about how, your type of job, like whoever would have thought, that a librarian would be working from home remotely, yeah, but it is happening. And, so there's 4 things that I recommend that people do when they're looking to pitch, whether it's, to your earlier question or to this question here. And let me list them out. Okay. Number 1 is, and some of it goes to what Yash said, and that is, explore the details before asking the question. What's the company culture like? What's the type of position? What would it require? What does it require for you to work at home? Some jobs really have high security, right? So you need a whatever, a VPN or whatever, and it costs some money, for all that, et cetera, and so forth. Number two is, what are the pros and cons of you working from home? I mean, immediately we think of the pros because that's what's in it for us. But are there any potential, negatives to working from home from the employer's standpoint or for your standpoint? Number three, create that value proposition proposal, and I'll come back and elaborate on that one a little more. Number four, then that's when you make the ask, whether it's to the recruiter or in the interviewing process when you meet the manager. Let me come back to the value proposition proposal because I'm a huge fan of doing this. This is where the comment that I made earlier, how most of us think like an employee. When you create a value proposition proposal, you are thinking like the CEO of that company, okay? So your value proposition proposal should have, number one, a summary of the situation, the job that you're in, the company. What is your ask and the benefits? Number two, list some of your accomplishments, obviously as it relates to the position. Number three, what is the timeline in which you are going to be working remote? Is it going to be immediate? Do you think that's the best way? Or are you going to ease yourself into it? Number four, what are the outcomes? Okay, more specific, the outcomes here for the company. And then the actual proposal. What is the cost? How are you going to stay connected with the team? What's your schedule going to be? How are you going to hold yourself accountable? And again, the benefits there. And then lastly, I think it's good to have what I call an FAQ, frequently asked questions. Meaning what are some of the objections and what are some of the answers, et cetera. I think if you do this, you're going to have a really good case. You're going to be able to come up with a really strong case for why working remotely is a good option.
Now, okay, Thor, expanding on this question, you're interviewing for this job. You're asking them, hey, I want to work, is there a possibility of working remote? And they say, well, yeah, but it's going to be a decrease in pay. Would you take it? And secondly, what is the normal difference of a pay cut? I mean, if we're going past like 20%, then no, or should you just go, if it's a 10%, then that's not too bad, then you should, I mean, obviously everybody's in a different situation, but is there normal metrics as far as percentages for like taking a decrease in pay? If let's say working remotely is an option?
So first thing I would caution is you mentioned asking during the interview. I would not wait till the interview to raise that question. Personally, I would ask that question of the talent acquisition professional that may have reached out to you or somebody in advance. Dropping that bomb on a hiring manager after they've put in time and effort to bring you in could, leave a nasty taste in their mouth. However, if they are open to moving the position to remote work, there's not particular numbers that I've seen, and maybe Yash or Oscar can correct me if you've seen actual numbers out there. But one of the things that I would take into account is whatever portion of that salary you are looking at a decrease on, think about the additional savings in your day-to-day life that you're going to make from working from home. Whether that's tolls, whether that's gas, whether that's mileage on your car, eating out. A lot of people, that I work with or have been with in office environment, it's out for lunch, $30, $40 lunches, and that adds up pretty quickly. You work from home, you're no longer doing that. Over 7 days, you're saving $250, which if you're making $2,500 a week by some chance, you're saving 10% right there simply on food. So I think it's all relative. I think it's for everybody to take into their own consideration what's that right amount for them. And I'll hand it over to Yash here in a second because I'm pretty sure he may have some numbers. But I think you have to do what's best for you. And I think you have to do what's best for you at that moment, not knowing that this is a permanent move. One of the things I cautioned back in, during the pre-pandemic and as it really started to ramp up was be cautious of what's going to happen with the whole work from home, work remote thing. Uh, I was concerned that a lot of companies are going to see a decrease in productivity and again starting to cut individuals or pushing to bring people back into the office. And some of the most recent stats have showed a lot of companies are considering how do we do, whether it's a split shift or what do we have to do to get people back on campus because they feel that's where the productivity is going to come. But it's not only in the work environment, it's also in the schooling system. I saw a stat, I think it was out of Philadelphia or somewhere in the Northeast, that there's an 80-something% increase in failing grades right now for kids doing remote learning because it just isn't hitting the mark. So, do what's best for you at this moment, but have the foresight to know that there's going to be a paradigm shift back and forth. I mean, everything moves in motion. It swung from, heavy, everybody's in office to everybody's working from home. That pendulum's going to come back to the middle at some point. And at that point, you could see that increase in salary again. But again, be cognizant of you're saving costs by working from home. And a lot of times you go back in the office, those costs are going to increase again.
Yash, you wanted to add?
Yeah, so I can share some numbers. I can share some percentages around what that decrease usually is. But a couple of things to stay here. One is this is kind of my approach to doing this. It's not going to be. It is fairly industry standard, but it's not going to be the same across the board. And also, these are recommendations that I make. So some companies take them, some don't. I would say most do. But I want to temper expectations with this as well. So that number is usually 6 to 12%, depending on what's called the EEO classification. So how we classify that job on how the work is being done. So it's on the lower end, a 6% decrease in person versus doing it virtually, and 12% on the higher end. The 12% on the higher end tends to be as you kind of go up, as you go towards the highly compensated jobs like the VP, executive, and C-level. But 6% on the lower end, and that's usually for more that are hourly and or positions that are kind of non-exempt. So that's kind of the metrics that we use. Once again, as Thor mentioned, there's a lot more to consider than just that, though, just depending on what the base salary is. The 6 to 12 could be completely negligible for all the reasons Thor just mentioned, traffic, gas, anything that deals with transportation, and then anything that deals with just the basics of life.
And I think one thing to take into consideration also is a lot of companies have come out and said that their cost of living adjustments are going to go into place for where you're officing out of. So let's say you were with, Google out there in Silicon Valley. You're now working remote, but you move to Arizona because you can do the same job in Arizona. A lot of these companies have said they're going to look at paying based off of what the average income in Arizona is. So you may have been making, let's throw a number out there, 200K out in California. They may move you down to 100K. You move to Arizona. A lot of these companies have said, you're not coming into the office. We're going to pay you for what the cost of living is in the city you're officing out of.
Okay, I'm going to switch this up a little bit. I hear you. I see you, Asher. You took one of my questions. So what I wanted to do with this presentation is I wanted to paint the picture of where we are now, and then let's try to find that remote dream job. So Oscar, Mr. LinkedIn, I'm coming to you. What do you need to do on your LinkedIn to also say that you're interested? Let's say you're interested in office remote only. How do you find that dream remote job? Let's start off there. So Asher, I see you.
So on LinkedIn, there is a feature that's free. Okay, it's available to anyone where you can turn it on and let recruiters know that you're open for opportunities. And there's a series of questions that it asks you, like where do you want to work, remotely, what parts of the country or even world, what type of work are you interested in, remote. Fill that out, and it literally shows right below your your headline in your about section. Okay, so that's one of the things you can do. But you know, the other place actually, it's a great resource. It's actually Google Jobs. Log in with your Gmail account and just type in on the search field Google Jobs, and there's a feature where you can fill out a very detailed query of the type of jobs that you're interested in. And in fact, before I logged on to on this panel, I actually went to it and I just typed in Google Jobs, and right there on the feature, one of the options, it says work from home. And so you can literally select put any title that you want, program manager, remote work, and Google will then show you job opportunities that are remote. What's nice about the Google Jobs too is that it crawls sites like LinkedIn, Indeed, Glassdoor, and a bunch of others. So now you have one place where you can go to. So those are just some of the basic things that people can do on LinkedIn.
Thor, you got some suggestions as well?
Yeah, so make sure whatever information you have on your profile, whether that's LinkedIn, Google, anything like that, is accurate. I know Yash has harped on this in previous panels. Don't lie. But one thing you can do is go out there and search for the jobs you're looking for and pull keywords from those job listings and make sure you're peppering those into whatever your profile is, because a lot of recruiters search based off of keywords. So use those keywords that are definitely up to speed in the market. When you think, like, some of the words that I know have changed recently. So talent acquisition has somewhat gone away. A lot of companies aren't calling it acquisition because that's kind of derogatory that you're acquiring somebody. So, should you have that on there, maybe time to see what the new trending word is, whether that's recruitment or whatnot. But make sure your profile is accurate. You're not lying, because at some point it's going to come out. It always does. Somebody's going to find out you fibbed on your resume or whatnot. You're going to be called to the mat on it. But be cognizant of what the key words are in the market. I know Yash and I have talked. He recently had a document that had 200, 300 words that were keywords that are industry hot right now. So do your research, figure out what the trending words are, because that's what those recruiters or headhunters are out there looking for. They're searching based off of those key phrases or words.
Josh, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I think just kind of talking about the buzzwords again, as opposed to it being just on LinkedIn, so to speak, have those buzzwords be a part of your resume no matter what. There are going to be people that are looking for those buzzwords, but there's also going to be systems that are looking for those buzzwords. So you're going to have something like Taleo or Workday that's going to be able to scan through your resume, scan through Twitter, scan through any of the social media that you have, to be honest, and be able to pull the different buzzwords from there and actually make a profile for what is this candidate really like. So you have you have talent acquisition software right now that's capable of doing a lot. So not only is it your LinkedIn or your resume, just anything that represents you should be kind of thought through appropriately. But do make sure you use those buzzwords, not just for people, but also for the technology that's behind it.
Okay, so we talked about kind of resume and kind of LinkedIn stuff. Let's talk about the interview. How can you tailor interviews for remote work? Is it different than, when you're interviewing for a regular office job? Obviously, you're going to be on Zoom, different platform. How do you stand out in the interview process?
I think that's where that earlier what I mentioned, that value proposition proposal comes into play, because if you've done your homework and you understand the industry, you understand the company, you understand, when I say the industry, have you been reading up on where, again, maybe because I haven't had dinner, so I'm thinking of food, okay? Restaurant industry. Like, do you know where the restaurant industry is at right now? What are some of the challenges that it's experiencing because of COVID? What are some restaurants doing to survive? In other words, you really go in and understand the industry that you're in, so that when you're going in for that interview, you're coming across as a thought leader. Like, who doesn't want to hire the best talent? Everyone does. Okay. But you, as the employee, the job seeker, you have to position yourself at that level that you truly understand. Like, quit looking for a paycheck. Like, look to make a difference.
Absolutely. Okay, let's look at what types of positions are available for remote work. Yash, I'm going to go with you. You got any positions that are hot trending for remote work?
Support positions. I would love to just answer with just that, to be honest, but support positions in general, that's that's primarily what's hot at this point in time, and it's really hot. So if you think about like some of the different areas of a business, you think about support, you think about revenue generation, you think about operations. It really is support that is trending to be almost entirely remote at this point in time. So there's some stuff that's going to be coming out related to this, and there's some stuff that's out there right now. So if you look at the Deloitte human capital trends that are coming out, there's some information on there around what jobs are really being moved from an office to remote, and what jobs are being moved successfully. And the ones that are being moved successfully truly are support positions. And when I say support, if you think about anything that is IT support, HR support, these are the types of positions that are really trending at this point in time. This is a big need kind of across the board anyways, with kind of the switch to virtual as well as the switch to managing workforces in a remote manner. So IT and HR support are probably the two that I would call out as kind of higher up there. And I would say marketing is kind of a very close, very, very close third, if not even joint with second.
I'm assuming you mean digital marketing. I'm assuming that's
Yeah.
not the traditional or crisis communication marketing maybe might be hot right now.
Actually, I'm sure that field is huge as well, just crisis comms in general. In fact, anything that deals with business continuity, I can see that being hot, but I'm not quite sure what that looks like from a remote perspective. But no, digital marketing, you're right.
Digital marketing. Hey, Oscar, you got anything to add on that one? From what you've seen out in the landscape when you're speaking to individuals and having people on your podcast?
You know, virtual assistants is also another area. I don't know what it is, but lately over the last like 2 or 3 weeks on LinkedIn, I've been getting invitations to connect from folks that either provide virtual assistant opportunities or have a virtual assistant, company, and so that's another area that I see growing. Now, one thing that I want to share with folks too is that technology is a double-edged sword. Technology has given some people the ability to go and sit on an island, somewhere, nice, less expensive, and still be able to work right now. But at the same time, folks, remember that there is someone in a foreign country, and I'm just going to pick Mexico because I'm Mexican, okay? And someone there is very fluent in English and in Spanish. They're bilingual. You can even tell. Like me, I'm fully bilingual, okay? And they are in Mexico at a much lower cost of living and able to provide services. And again, I mean, like I said, technology is a double-edged sword, folks. So always be building on your skills.
Thor, do you have anything to add on that one before I move on?
No, I think Yash hit it square on the head with especially the HR support roles. One thing that I've seen a ton of is as we move towards this virtual work, virtual everything, virtual learning also. I've seen a lot of jobs posted around learning development, whether it's instructional design or something like that. If your team isn't going to be in the office or face to face with whether it's a trainer or whoever, they're going to be doing it via computer. So if you're on the instructional design side, you're tech savvy, creating whether it's learnings or documentation and things like that for the team members to make sure they're up to speed because they're missing that face-to-face instruction or onboarding or whatnot.
Okay. I do want to ask this question because I know a lot of people are in this boat. The pandemic has given a lot of people time to think, time to reflect. And so a lot of people have gone, you know what? I'm doing this job right now and I really don't like it. This isn't what I was meant to do. I want to make a career switch. I want to do this. But I have all this experience in this area, but I can't really carry it to this new area that I really want to do. Do you recommend to them to make that switch? Or do you think that they should just keep doing what they've been doing, find that job that they have all that experience in, and then go find something else? I don't know. I'm just curious your thoughts, Oscar. What do you think?
I've made 11 career transitions. I've been out in the workforce now for just under 30 years. So do the math, okay? Every 2.5 years, I've transitioned careers. A lot of it had to do because initially I picked the tech industry, the startup world, and startups, contrary to popular belief, most of them go out of business. And so I was, every year and a half, I was on the outside looking in. But you know what? I'm going to tell you this from a perspective of a guy that's going to be 52 years old here in 2 months. Do what makes you happy. Have no regrets. I have been in situations where I truly gave my best to the company. I truly believed in the product or the service. And again, when push came to shove, the company did what was best for them. And I remember early in my career, I think I was 25 years old, I was supporting the outside sales rep for Latin America. The guy got laid off the day before Thanksgiving. And it wasn't because he stole or whatever. It was just for sales performance. Later on in my life, in my career, I realized they could have waited to lay him off until after Thanksgiving. Like, why ruin the guy's Thanksgiving? That's horrible. And so that's, folks, why I tell you that the answer, should you stay or should not? Do whatever you feel is good for you. What makes you happy? That's the bottom line.
What do you think, Yash?
Yeah, so we've been calling it a pandemic pivot, right? It's the idea of using the pandemic to kind of pivot where you're headed. And I absolutely agree with Oscar. Not many people will say it quite that way as well, but I am definitely in the same boat. Organizations are going to do what's best for them, and they should, right? Like that's why they're around, and that's why they can be around. But you got to do what's right for you. So if you're thinking of making a switch, don't think about company loyalty. Do not think about what's going to be the wood on the street. You got to do what's right for you and do what makes you happy. So if switching careers at this point in time and using the pandemic as an opportunity to get you into a field that does give you either the happiness or the greater income or the job growth or whatever you're looking for, or the location change, I think that's the right way to approach it. Do it.
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword too. I mean, it depends on what your move is to. So if you're moving to one of the high trending industries that's growing based off of the pandemic, of course your move's going to be a little bit easier. If you're going into a field or attempting to go into a field that's downsizing, you have to know that what would have been moderate competition for a move in 2019 is a heck of a lot harder here in 2021 now. You're battling up against much more people who have had the role, been laid off, and are trying to get back into it. So just know what you're getting into before you step out. But I agree with both Oscar and Yash. I mean, you can't go to work every day being miserable. I mean, it takes more of a toll on your body, on you mentally, physically. I mean, it's not the right thing to stay in a miserable job and just continue pounding your head. Do what makes you happy, step out, but just be aware of what the move will be. And that may be moving into a growing career, maybe not in the exact role you wanted, but get in with a company that does something that you're interested in and take that entry level role. If it's, going into call centers are huge right now. Maybe you don't want to be a call center representative. That's not your long-term goal. Maybe it's, an operations manager or something like that. But use the opportunity to pivot into a company that works, digital call centers or whatnot. And then as soon as the opportunity presents itself, you move up inside of that organization.
Okay, I'm going to move on to your guys' questions. I've got like 36 of them already. So, unfortunately, I'm not going to get to everybody's questions. So, I believe I couldn't remember who asked it. I think Linda asked if you can connect with Oscar, Yash, and Thor on LinkedIn. Go ahead and do it. Just do the Oscar method, okay? If you've ever listened to Oscar's talk, he'll tell you, don't just click on their picture and go add me to LinkedIn. Make sure you put a personal message, because there's 220 somewhat people in this audience. And unfortunately, you may not be recognized because, of course, we can't see you on the screen. So make sure to write, hey, I saw you with Cheryl at this presentation, just so that they gives them some context that you're not a complete stranger looking to hawk them for LinkedIn Premium or whatever sales pitch you've got, okay? So let's get to the questions here.
Cheryl,
I'm going to go to you.
Can I take this opportunity, something we've talked on our previous roundtables, seminars about, this question may come up later on. How is it okay to connect with recruiters or hiring managers or anything like that? Use that same tactic you just talked about. Give it a personal flair when you connect with somebody, because those mid-level managers, those senior level people, they're getting invites nonstop out of the blue. And I mean, in all honesty, a lot of people are deny. You know, I don't know this person. They're just trying to sell me something or whatnot. So give that personal flair to it. That's going to make it more likely they're going to connect with you. And depending on how you word it or what you say, you may even get a personal response back. Hey, loved your message, love where your head's at. You know, what are you actually looking to do? Or something like that. It could be a conversation starter. So sorry to interrupt you, but that was a previous topic we've talked about. And it not only goes for connecting with us, but for connecting with anybody.
And I'm gonna add on to that. If you're a guy trying to connect with a girl, make sure to put that personal message. You know why? Because now people are using LinkedIn as Tinder. So you got to make sure that you're not seen as some creepo trying to get a date. Okay, you guys? You heard it here first. Okay, I like Greg's question. Greg's question was pretty interesting. I'm going to go to Yash because I always give him the tough ones. So why stop? So if I have 100 minutes in a day to search for, and I'm going to say, I'm going to fill in the blank, a remote job, how many minutes should I put in combing LinkedIn contacts and letting them know that I'm open for work versus applying directly to jobs online with a warm intro on LinkedIn Connection, as we talked about, versus working with contingent recruiters versus working with retained recruiters? Sounds like somebody only has a certain number of pi minutes in a day and wants to know how the breakdown goes. So Yash, take it away. Let me know.
Okay. So you do have 100 minutes. I would say you should spend at least 3/4 of your time just on networking with the folks that you already know and trying to get a reference. I think we've talked about this on previous webinars out here as well. The value of a reference is unmeasurable in so many different ways. You have someone that already works at this organization that can put in an internal recommendation for you. That is a big deal. Network with those people. Talk to them. Kind of give them what your value proposition is. Let them know that this is who you are. This is what you're capable of doing. This is what your background is, and you're interested in a job out there. The fact that they already know you, first of all, is like step number one. You don't have to bother connecting with them, right? You're already connected with them. So you're kind of past that first gate already. Secondly, all you need is for them to see it. Once they see it, if they would like to put in an internal recommendation, that's great. If not, you have the opportunity to pitch to them and let them know why you would be good for a certain job. So I would say do your research on the company that they work for right now, but most definitely spend, I would say the majority of your time, 3/4 is maybe even an understatement, but spend the majority of your time trying to connect with those people, reach out to your internal network and get them to do the work for you. A lot of them will get benefits or bonuses as a result of that as well. There's something in it for them. And no one necessarily needs to know what the relationship you have with them is. All right. So you could have just met this person once at a coffee shop, or you may know them for 20 plus years. It doesn't matter when the internal recommendation has been put in. It holds a lot of value. Spend the majority of your time on that.
Oscar, I'm going to go to you.
Yeah.
My networking dude. Talk to me about networking in a COVID environment. Is LinkedIn messaging the only way that you can connect with people? Is that the only way that we can get to folks that we haven't seen in a long time, especially since we've been in Silicon Valley here and we're suffering in place, as I like to call it, instead of sheltering in place? You got any recommendations, Oscar?
Yeah. So for those people that don't know, is my natural personality is an introvert, and believe it or not, I'm actually okay with shelter in place. Okay, I'm okay. All right, as an introvert. Um, Here's one tip that I recommend, folks. I think you can. All right, take a screenshot of the names of the people that are participating. I know some people have first name or initial or whatever, and so you can't read it. But there are some people that have their full name listed. Okay, and look them up on LinkedIn. And you might be able to find, it's going to be a little hard because you can't see all the pictures and all that type of stuff, but at least that's one thing that I recommend. Like, take advantage of these situations. For me as an introvert, a warm introduction is the best way to start networking. Okay, and so, like, to Cheryl's point, you personalize that message. There's other social media platforms, right, that you can go on there, but I you can. The other thing is that there are email online services where you can type in someone's name and company, and it can kind of guess what their email address is. So there's a way to get someone's email address. But everything here, folks, as far as networking, is the message that you send. It's not that you're being creepy, because sometimes people say, "Oh, but what if people feel like you're stalking them?" It's because of how you say and what you write. But if you know how to communicate in a way that is, you're thinking about them. Maybe you did some research on Oscar Garcia and you realize that I'm an introvert, and so you're an introvert too. And so you start out thinking, Oscar, oh my gosh, I can't believe, as an introvert, why do you speak more with your hands? I love it. It's like something silly, something funny like that, that's personal. I'm not going to be like, oh my gosh, this person's kind of cool. It's funny. And it's all about building that relationship. And the last thing I want to say, Cheryl, and I say this to a lot of people, is networking is being a friend. Just be a friend. And if someone doesn't want to be your friend, go find someone else that does.
And Cheryl, one thing I'd like to add, the question also talked about allocating time to contingent recruiters or whatnot. I would, as Yash said and Oscar said, networking, employees within the organization or whatnot to get recommendation. If you're going to spend your time connecting with recruiters, I would focus on those that are direct recruiters within the organizations. As you think through pandemic, companies are cutting, cost. You have to believe they're going to limit their usage of third-party recruiting. Why am I going to pay anywhere upwards of 25% commission to a third-party recruiter when my internal recruiters, with the amount of applicants out there and the amount of people looking for work, have a honeypot of potential candidates right here? So just be cognizant of which recruiters you are working with. There's no reason not to connect with a contingent third-party recruiter, but if you're going to invest time, I would recommend going directly to the organization's recruiting team rather than a third-party, firm that's working with an additional, a company.
Okay. Let's see. I had a question about the application tracking system. But for some reason, he keeps getting rejected for jobs. Now, Yash, you talked about the key words, the buzzwords. Is it a matter of the buzzwords not being there? Or because he's saying that he always gets rejected, and also the fact that he gets the sorry, we found a better candidate. What would you recommend to that type of candidate?
Yeah, it's so I definitely do think the buzzwords have a lot to do with it here. It's like just thinking about how, and I can talk to Taleo and Workday, and the other ones are very similar. What they do with your profile is they build these things called different indexes. Okay, one of these indexes could be leadership skills. One of them could be technical skills. There's certain buzzwords that these are looking for. If those buzzwords are not present, the odds are you are not going to be able to get through that first gate that even leads to a human being being able to see your profile. And that does happen quite a bit. I would also say kind of use, and I don't think you're doing this, but use standard resume formats. So, I've seen some resumes that have been created in PowerPoint and uploaded to different websites. That is not going to help your case at all. You want to make sure it is in the format that is the most easily accessible and available to the majority of people. And that usually is a Word document or a PDF. I think they both work very similarly on most applicant tracking systems. But at the same time, kind of keep that in mind. If you're doing something that's different, or you have a lot of pictures on there, you have pictures that have, screenshots of words, I say, but there's probably another way to say that. Don't do that. Just have real words on there and have text on there. Don't try anything funky. It can be a good way to stand out, but for the most part, if you're not able to get through the applicant tracking system, there's usually a reason behind it, and it's either because you're using not the right method or the wrong buzzwords.
Another kind of insider trick is if it's the assessments that you're not getting through, avoid answering if it's a 1 to 5 scale. 1, strongly agree, 5, strongly disagree. Use the outliers. Try to avoid answering in the middle. The algorithms and things like that for the assessments, they're looking for a clear delineation one way or the other. And when you do a lot of the middle, 2, 3, 4s, you're tying yourself up, and a lot of times that'll lead to a rejection. So just a little insider secret.
Okay. Let's see. How do I find direct recruiters? Oscar, I'm going to go to you because I know Mr. LinkedIn. How do I find direct recruiters within companies? I remember we had talked about this a while back with one of your seminars that we had talked about. So can you address that a little bit?
So on LinkedIn, go to the company that you're interested in and type in the title. You can do a search on LinkedIn. You can get really, pretty creative on the searches there on LinkedIn, and that should be able. That way, you should be able to identify who the internal recruiters are at the company, and then you connect with them that way. Another way is obviously looking at to see if you have if you know anyone at that company, and then connecting with that person, reaching out to that person and asking them specifically, like, hey, Cheryl, I know you work over at Oracle and, blah, 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 et cetera and so forth. Do you know any other recruiters at, within your organization and so forth? Would you feel comfortable making that introduction? The last tip is that don't neglect the power of your alumni network. I'm a Cal grad, and I virtually will connect with any Cal student or alumni just because we have that in common. And it's so, yeah, if I work, at a company and person asks me like, hey, this is what I'm looking to do. I'm interested in this job. I'd be happy to, make an introduction and so forth. Those are some tips.
Okay. Last question before I kind of move on to Texas stuff. I got laid off on maternity leave. Should I still reach out to my previous manager for recommendations for my next job?
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's no reason not to.
Yeah. And, the other thing I want to say about recommendations, and I'm assuming this is probably like recommendations on LinkedIn, is I tell people, get recommendations that paint a holistic picture of who you are, not just, sales or not just software developer, but hey, if you maybe are volunteering at the YMCA and you know the manager or the executive director, connect with them on LinkedIn, ask them to write you a recommendation about your fundraising skills, okay, or whatever, you know, program that you put together, or maybe you help put together a virtual summit, okay, get a recommendation so that, again, it paints a holistic picture of who you are as a person.
Okay. I know we have a lot of questions. I apologize that we can't get to everybody's question. Again, you can reach out to my panelists offline to find out a little bit more. We'll go through more questions later on. I do want to go to our Silicon Valley TEXIT and go to Yash and Thor, my Texas experts, to find out. Make the pitch, you guys. Why are all these companies, we know why all these companies are moving to Texas, but why? I mean, why are they moving away from Silicon Valley? And do you have any strategies? What's hot in Texas as far as remote jobs are concerned?
Well, I think there's three key things that are driving companies out of, I would say, California in general, as the big news y'all all seen. High taxes, expensive housing, and government regulations are really kind of the key three things that are driving TEXIT to take place. You've seen Oracle, HP, not directly tied to TEXIT, I would say, but Charles Schwab has recently announced that they are, as part of their merger with TD Ameritrade, is moving to Denton, Texas, which is just outside of Dallas. But those three things are really what is driving it. And then the fact that, and I guess I would put it under the government regulations, is the pandemic has exposed a lot of what the lockdowns have done to these businesses. And Texas, for the most part, outside of, Yash, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think realistically, we were probably only closed 6 to 8 weeks, is what I would say. I mean, there were pockets of, you know, local governments that were regulating, but as far as state government regulating, Governor Abbott and his team opened us up immediately and wanted to get things back to normal.
Yash.
Yeah, so I'll kind of change the lens there, right? So like, why Texas? Here as an employee, and three reasons: more space, lower cost of living, and it's a different vibe. It's a different adventure out here in Texas. So I would say there's a slower pace in the work that I've done with companies in Texas versus in California. It's very visible. You will notice it right away for any of you that make the change. I also want to say it's a very friendly population. You hear about Southern hospitality in general, but I do want to kind of talk about that for a second too, because and the people from California and specifically the Bay Area have been unbelievably nice, and there's no taking away from that. But there is a certain pace to life out here that leads to that friendliness. And I think anyone that's worked with either a company or a client in Texas will probably notice that. It's more magnified in cities like Houston and Dallas, but maybe less so in Austin. So while I talk about all of this, I think it's almost important to remember Austin is very different and probably has the closest vibe you can get to the Bay Area compared to some of the other major cities, being Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, and even Midland, Odessa, Lubbock even. So just some things to keep in mind. But when it comes to more space, when I say more space, I really do mean like there's just more space in general. Everything's bigger in Texas. That is definitely true. Homes are going to be bigger. Someone made a comment about this earlier, but you can buy significantly more with your money in Texas compared to almost anywhere in California. There is a lower cost of living kind of across the board. This goes for activities. It goes for food, drinks, whatever you want to do. There is a significantly lower cost of living out here. And the exact numbers are, it's a 0.6x. It's 0.6 off of 1 in California, right? So it's significantly less. It's almost 50% lower from a cost of living perspective. And that kind of carries over to all the different activities and living that would concern someone that's making the move. So yeah, just a couple of points about like why an employee would want to move to Texas. I think some other things we can talk about are there's mild winters out here. You don't have to worry about that too much. Some cons though, and I do want to acknowledge the cons for sure. So property taxes are significantly higher. If you end up owning property in Texas, you will notice that your taxes are going to be higher compared to California in particular. Something to keep in mind, but at the same time, you can get more home. People always say it's Texas is a great place to make your money and build your equity, but you probably want to move elsewhere at some point in time, just because of how expensive property taxes can be. Summers are hot. That can be a con. I personally don't mind that too much. I think I would prefer the heat over extreme colds. Not that you guys experience extreme colds by any means, but something to keep in mind. And the political landscape is most definitely different. I want to make sure that's acknowledged over here. I will say Austin is going to be the one city that you would move to in Texas that has the most similar political landscape, stereotypically, when compared to California. But the rest of the cities are probably not in that boat.
Okay. So I'm going to go to Oscar now. Like, what happens if you're kind of stuck in both worlds? You're in California and you want to look for jobs out here, but you also want to explore Texas. Like, how do you do that on LinkedIn? Like, how do you talk to people about, like, how do you tailor, two geographical regions that are not close to one another and put that on your resume or on your LinkedIn?
The way to do that is there's one is on your headline is some of the wording, and the skill set that you use. But the really key area is in your about section, your summary, where you tell your story, and that is an area where you can talk about your interest of, to your point, you're here, but you're open to Texas, another part of the country. And then the other part of it too, Cheryl, is it's really those informational interviews, that networking that you do, because it is challenging. Even though I mentioned that what you can do on LinkedIn, but at the end, there's nothing replaces more being able to have 10 or 15-minute Zoom call, phone call, or networking with someone, informational interview where the person can hear you out, hear your story to clarify some of that confusion. That's ultimately the best way to do it, to be able to know how to build and nourish relationships so that people can hear your story.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think you need to. It's not like y'all are on Venus, we're on Mars, to be honest with you. I mean, Texas, I guess the preconceived notion is Texas, big old cowboy hats, big old belt buckles, and that's what everybody walks around with and rides a horse on the weekend. When you look at kind of the three key markets that are hiring and where these large companies are moving, Dallas, Houston, Austin are really the big three. When you talk about diverse communities, they are very diverse. Off the top of my head, I think the stat that I read was Dallas, and we're talking about Dallas proper, not the suburbs, where of course you're going to have, a little bit different demographics out there. But Dallas, 25% of Dallas's population is foreign born. That's incredible. That was one of the biggest things when I moved to Texas from Louisiana over 10 years ago, is I was looking for that diversity and coming over here. And Houston, if I remember the stats right, I think it's like 40% Caucasian, 20% or 30% Latino, 12 to 15% African American, 6% Asian, 5% of other origin. I mean, it is a very diverse community. So don't think that you have to put on a fake hat and act like something you're not over here. You're going to run into the same type of people here that you are anywhere else. I think that's one misconception that a lot of people have about Texas.
So what are the kind of booming industry areas? I know that Yash talked about like remote work and what is hot in remote work. But what about Texas? What are the most hire jobs out in Texas? Is it going to be tech or is it going to be non-tech? More oil? I don't know. You guys talk to
Yeah,
me.
tech is definitely big out here. As Yash was saying, Austin is often known as the San Francisco of Texas. Um, you've got Google that's got offices there, Facebook, Apple. Uh, Elon Musk is building his new gigafactory out here. A lot of the tech companies are relocating to the Texas environment. What's huge in Austin also is programming. So I didn't even realize this until recently. But I think there are over 25 gaming development companies, software development companies that are based in the Austin, Texas area. So they're huge on programming, gaming. I think EA has a huge campus out there. When you get into the Dallas market, you've got a couple of major companies out there. American Airlines, Southwest are two of the biggest that are located up there. You've got Dell that's up there in the Dallas area. Some financial institutions are moving up there. You've got a lot of, which it's a tough time for this. Oscar mentioned it earlier, the service industry, but a lot of food service companies are based out of Dallas too. Chili's, Pizza Hut, 7-Eleven, companies like that. There are probably 30 or 40 major brands that are nationwide, that their corporate headquarters are there. Then when you get down into Houston, it's oil and gas with some tech now. Tech is getting bigger and bigger. The caution I would have around Texas is what's going to be next with, a political shift. How is that going to impact the oil and gas industry and the shift to more renewables than, pure oil? But one of the stats I looked up, and I don't remember how long ago this was, but Texas has somewhere around 55 Fortune 500 companies based in Texas. So we've got a pretty significant, over 10% of the Fortune 500 companies are based out of Texas. So there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of growth. But hopefully, Cheryl, that answers kind of your key. What are the big kind of three sectors in the Texas market?
Okay, Yash, because you guys are open and you're not suffering in place like the rest of us in California here, how's the networking? Because Oscar always talks, every single time he talks, always talks about the big buzzword. If we talk about the big buzzword, he always talks about it's about networking, right? It's about who you know, not about what you know. So can you talk to us about the job networking landscape? Because here in California, we used to go to meetups. We used to have, LinkedIn locals. We used to have a whole bunch of stuff going on every single day of the week. What's going on in your guys' area, specifically maybe Houston? Take it for example.
Yeah, so we're not open like we used to be. It's definitely not a free for all out here. There's no real meetups or networking parties that are taking place. Things are still a little bit more quiet than they have been. Actually, significantly more quiet. But I would say there are a couple of things to keep in mind. One is most organizations that I know about that are based out of Houston specifically are still hosting in-person interviews. So that is still a thing that is still happening. It's actually the same in Dallas, but not the same in Austin. I do have a couple of ex-coworkers that recently moved to the Austin area and are working for companies out there. And they are no longer going to be relocating as they were supposed to a year ago. Most of them have been able to kind of stay where they are. One of them lives out of state. One of them lives here in Houston. So things are kind of evolving pretty quickly, but I would say we're not open from a networking perspective like the way we were. You still got to focus on the virtual networking. Still, everything that Oscar described earlier around virtual networking and what that looks like still applies, even in Texas.
Okay. And I know you talked a little bit about the salaries out there, salaries versus, your taxes. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that for those of us who are Californians who pay a lot of taxes?
Yeah, most definitely. So a couple of things that I want to just like broad statements here. One is you obviously don't have to worry about state income tax here in Texas, which is a big deal, and can definitely offset a lot of different factors. That and the lower cost of living itself usually justifies kind of a pay decline, if you would like. But I'll give you a real example here. So there's a business development job that I was building a job profile for recently for my current client, and we had to decide between, is this going to be this was not going to be a California versus Texas thing. It was more so is it going to be an in-person or virtual job? And just to kind of put things in perspective, so it was a 205K if it was going to be in person, and it was dropped down to 172.5 had it been remote. So they ended up going with an in-person job in that scenario, and in that situation, it was the business that made the decision that it had to be in person. But just to kind of put things in perspective, I would say, like, just kind of thinking about that $30,000 to $40,000 range, I would say that is definitely a difference even in Texas. That kind of amounts to a little bit closer to almost 15% to 20% of what that job was. So definitely different than the range I mentioned previously, but something to keep in mind. I think when it comes to people that are moving from California to Texas, I was trying to do a little bit of research on this right before. And something I noticed is there is definitely a decline in salary. I think that's something that you just got to mentally prepare yourself for. That is going to happen. But you got to think about what your money buys out here versus what it did previously. And that is something for everyone to keep in mind. Just kind of deal with it. It is unfortunately the reality of the world that we live in. But it is important to note that there are some benefits to it. State income tax not being present is most definitely a positive that should be kept in mind. And you do need to consider kind of what Thor talked about earlier. There is a shift to kind of the remote working environment over here, and there's savings that are allocated as a result of that everyone needs to think about on a more personal level.
So quickly, and this is Googleable. I mean, this is nothing that I'm bringing to the table, but I went ahead and ran some numbers before we jumped on here just so we could get some factual representation of kind of what it looks like. And of course, these are statewide numbers, so it's hard to judge because Yash just threw out there, 180, 200K job, but that's going to be specific to a certain type of industry, certain location, things like that. But some of the key numbers that Yash has talked about here. So median income in Texas is 61K, California is 75K. That's median income. So, I mean, that's across the spectrum. That's, from your lowest earners all the way up to your top earners. Average house price in Texas, $220,000. Average house price in California, $609,000.
Well, that's cheap. Cheap.
Yep.
629 is
median
cheap.
Rent. So median rent in Texas, $1,045 a month. California, $1,409. So that right there shows you're going to make a little bit less money, but your savings and the equal cost of live, or the equaling out of the cost of living is right there. And then Yash mentioned, there's no state income tax. Everything is based off of sales tax. So you'll of course have your state sales tax, which Texas is 6.25. California is 7.25, and then of course you add on the locality taxes of whatever the city or municipality may add to that. I know here in Houston it's 8.25 total is our sales tax. So those give you some of the numbers, but one thing that Yash did harp on that was a big shocker for me. It was great. Hey, I've got no state income tax. That's great. I don't have to file that at the end of the year. But when I get my 2.5% property tax bill at the end of the year, that another $8,000 to $10,000, that basically offsets that state income tax.
Okay, Oscar, I'm going to bring it back home. Let's bring it back to California. Give them the pitch of why to stay here in the Valley. I know Oscar and we're both from Mountain View, home of Google. So bring it back home, Oscar. Tell them why they need to stay here and what are the advantages here. If they didn't remember already after hearing about the taxes are lower, the rent is lower, the house is bigger.
You know, I've grown up here in Mountain View. We moved here to Mountain View when I was 5 years old. When Moffett, we had the airfield base here, and at the time, the semiconductor. It was truly Silicon Valley. It was the semiconductor that were thriving, and at the time. If you worked as a blue collar worker in the assembly line at a semiconductor, you were making some good money and were able to afford to buy a home here. Homes back then were $200,000, $300,000, and today they're out of control. In fact, it's sad because my kids can't afford to live in the city that they were born in. But I mean, what do we have here in the Bay Area? Let's speak for the Bay Area here. I mean, obviously, still we have tremendous amount of large tech companies. I think I joke around that we should, instead of calling it Silicon Valley, we should call it Social Media Valley. Because even just right here in Mountain View, I can literally, honestly, got the truth, I can literally walk to LinkedIn, WhatsApp, Google, Facebook, okay? And so they're still here. We also have a tremendous brain power here with all the amazing universities that are in the Bay Area, both public and private institutions. And we still also have a lot of a strong government footprint here that also fuels innovation. Hey, and not to mention, I mean, I can complain to people about on the East Coast about 50-degree weather, and they're going to laugh at me. They're like wearing shorts and flip flops, and then on the summertime, you know, you walk out of your house and it's either dry heat or it's humidity. And here, I mean, when it's 90 degrees, we're like baking. So we do have that going on here as well in the Bay Area.
Yeah, I think one thing, Cheryl, is the grass isn't always greener on the other side. I mean, you've got to do what's best for you, what's best for your family. And because you see all these large companies, you know, jumping ship, it's a moment in time. I mean, things like we talked about a little while ago, things come in waves, the pendulum swings back and forth. Um, you know, you never know what policies are going to change to drive organizations in different directions. I think I just read the other day that California has the largest budget surplus they've ever had. I think y'all got like $30 billion in budget surplus right now, which is incredible. So you never know what that's going to do. Is that going to result in lower taxes at some point? You never know. But Cheryl, you're not an optimist, are you? But you know, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. You've got to do what's best for you, what's best for your family before you make a major decision like that. Take into account all of the factors, because a lot of people hear, "Oh, Texas is great. You know, there's no state income tax. That's great. Get out here, buy a house, and when you get that, you know, tax bill of $8,000, $10,000, your tax bill, you're like, oh, well, I didn't know about that before I moved out here." So that could equal out things. So just be cognizant of all the factors that play into what's a good decision and what isn't.
Okay. Thank you so much, you guys. I'm going to go to questions to close this out. I'm going to try to do as many questions as possible. So if you guys don't watch Jim Cramer and Mad Money, what I try to do is we try to ask questions, and I only want like 1 or 2 words, maybe 3 words. Maybe I'll even give you a sentence, but we got to make this quick. So I've got like 44 questions here. So I'm going to try to do
We'll get it right this time, Cheryl. I promise you. We'll get it right this time. We never succeed at this.
Okay, what types of jobs are in Texas, Thor?
Well, we just talked about it. So tech, programming, IT is the 3 I would say.
Okay, Yash, how important is a portfolio to show with a resume?
It's important. It's important to prove your worth, right? It's an example of your work.
Oscar, what is the best way to secure a non-remote tech job from a Silicon Valley company?
I mentioned at the very beginning, I don't know if this person was heard, but again, put together that value-added proposal that I mentioned, where you outline the benefits, the value proposition for the company, the pros and cons, and so forth. So yeah, have the person maybe go back, and I know this is going to be on the podcast, so they can go back and listen
a lot
to
of
it.
these questions we've already answered. I'm wondering where these people were when we were talking about it. Oscar, I'm going to go back to you because this is an Oscar question. Any tips for people who cannot move away from high cost living areas, for example, Bay Area, LA, San Diego, and are looking for more remote jobs?
Yeah, so LinkedIn and Google are your best friends to identify those opportunities out there. The other thing too, and kind of what Yash, our previous question is, folks, it is true what Yash mentioned about that portfolio, especially those of us that are mid-level and higher. Like, remember back in elementary school, show and tell? You bring your little teddy bear and then you let people talk about it. Like, somehow we become adults and all we do is tell people how amazing we are. Well, show and tell, folks. Put together your portfolio. It blows my mind how VPs of marketing say they're the best. And then I go onto the LinkedIn profile or whatever social media, and it's like, where's your example of your work?
Okay. That was a little longer than one sentence, but I'll take it. I'll take it. Let's see. God, these are long questions. Remote jobs. Oh no. Okay. Remote jobs can mean that the job need not be with the U.S. worker who is in the U.S. Therefore, how do we determine who and how we compete with those abroad? Thor, I'm going to give this one to you.
Oh, that's a tough question. A lot of companies have outsourced to, overseas due to lower cost wages due to the pandemic. I mean, lower cost wages have been decreased to cut cost at all corners. So I could see more of those remote jobs coming back to the U.S. I know there's a high desire to bring them back in regards to just ability to communicate and effectively get things done in a quick manner. So efficiency is going to be the name of the game.
Okay. Should I go back to one?
Can I add something to that?
Yeah, of course.
I want to tell, folks, I want to tell you something. You're not going to be a fit for every opportunity out there, and you have to be okay with that. Okay, I'm not a fit. Just like I tell people, I probably don't relate to 80% of you. That's okay. Cheryl's going to have another webinar in a month from now, and she's going to bring another set of speakers that you might relate to. I lost an opportunity to training opportunity with the client in Panama because my fees were too high. I'm okay with that. Move on and find someone that values what I bring, and vice versa. Move on, folks. Not every job opportunity is for you.
Very true, Oscar. Okay, this one's a long one. Given that all work is now amenable to remote, given that employers have realized that we can just be productive working from home than in the office, do we really need to make a distinction? I suspect that there will be a honeymoon after all this is over when folks want to go into the office because they're so desperate for human contact. But when that wears off, we're going to go back to the option to work where we want. Yash, will we have the opportunity to pick and choose where we work, or is it an employer's world where they're just going to tell us you're in the office or you're doing remote?
I don't think it's going to be an employer's world. There's going to be a lot of information related to this coming out in the near future. I 100% know that for a fact. I think everyone can see that. But no, it's not going to be an employer's world the way it used to be. You are going to have the opportunity to kind of figure out what that looks like and figure out what is the most efficient way of getting your job done. And employers, you got to remember, are looking to save money here. They're looking to lower their costs no matter what. And doing it remotely is a great way to do it. It's in their best interest to do it that way. And they've got to find a way to make that work efficiently. I do believe that more jobs are going to go remote in the near future. But something to keep in mind is I don't think it's going to be a employer's world. I think the employee is going to have a big say on how their work gets done and when it gets done.
Let's hope. Let's hope, I hope so. Thor, this question's to you. I lost a discriminatory court case against a former employer. I had the job for only 6 months. Unfortunately, the court case is easy to find with a simple Google search of my name. Is it necessary to list the job even though it was over 7 years ago?
Oh, that's a tough question. I guess it would depend on how many jobs you've had since then. Uh, my recommendation would be if it's your second to last job, yes, it probably needs to be on there. If it's 4 jobs ago, uh, and it's not relevant to what you're applying for now, I wouldn't put it on my resume.
Okay. Yash, what is the, okay, let me rephrase the question because it's a little grammatically. What is the best way to find buzzwords? Can we have Yash's list? You got a list of buzzwords you can give them?
So I know what Thor
teamwork, communication.
I know what Thor was talking about earlier, and honestly, that was a very simple Google search I did. Any of you that are familiar with just Google in general, but even Reddit, for example, are going to be able to find this. But it really was like a list of different indexes created by popular softwares. That's kind of how I started doing my research. But I would say, like, if you think about a field, just Google that field. Business continuity is a good example. Just look up business continuity. You will see all the different buzzwords that are being used right now. Look at Indeed jobs, look at LinkedIn jobs, any other job website, and look at what some of the popular terms are. That is a good way of finding buzzwords that are not indexes like leadership skills or soft skills, but more technical in nature.
Okay,
And one quick thing also, Cheryl, is use the thesaurus to break up the word. So whatever word you're honing in on, don't use the same word multiple times. Use that word, use the thesaurus, and use 2 different variations of that word, and that will expose you to some more of the buzzwords itself.
okay.
I would also say Google buzzwords not to use on your LinkedIn profile, on your resume. Stop telling people you're team-oriented. Stop telling people you're detail-oriented. Stop telling people you're experienced, because everyone says that.
So basically, you need to think outside the box, you guys. Okay, Oscar, going back to you. What are your thoughts on office hoteling spaces, WeWork, Regis, for offering an employer an in-office experience while working remotely?
That could be an opportunity, to try, things out to see. It almost kind of reminds me of, like, and I haven't done this, but I thought about this, about in the training that I do, how I just need Wi-Fi. I thought, I'm like, wow, what if I went to whatever, Panama, Costa Rica, or wherever, and did an Airbnb for a month to try it out, right? And so kind of what you're describing is, like, I think of that scenario, but in terms of working remotely to try it out to see if it makes sense for the employer, for you, et cetera, and so forth. So I think that would be a viable option.
And clear something like that with your employer as well. So, like, I can tell you from my situation, like, we are required to work in the United States. So I literally cannot do any work outside of the United States, and the reason behind that is very tax benefit specific, and the way we classify our employees. But something to keep in mind. Just kind of keep that in mind and clear that with your employer first.
Okay, this one's at Oscar specifically. I was at a company that furloughed employees, asked remaining employees for a collection to support the furloughed employees, then laid off employees before increasing the stock dividends to stockholders. I don't know what that was. Might have been a reference to something that you hadn't mentioned. Hey, Thor, how do I get past HR companies that I don't know?
In what regards?
How do I get past HR at companies I don't know? Sorry.
Oh, okay. So how do you get your foot in the door?
Past HR at companies I don't know?
If it's by HR in regards to trying to get, an interview or whatnot, we talked about it earlier in the roundtable around those connections and really starting to network, find somebody that's within the organization, have them put in a referral, and that's the best way to get your name pulled to the front of the pile.
Lisa, I'm sorry. No, attendees won't be able to connect with each other. Sorry, the permissions are pretty high on this seminar. Sorry about that. What about the cover letter? Yash, what about that cover letter? How do tracking systems handle them, or do they only screw things up?
No, so they don't screw things up. One is a cover letter is almost an amazing addition to making it through the first initial screening, right? So as soon as you have a human being that's able to read this, that's going to be great. We've talked about this in previous panels, but a cover letter is important. It's not something that is being phased out. It's not something that is, not important at this point in time. It might be lower on the popularity scale, but it is most definitely something that is needed. And if you have a job application that requires it, absolutely do it. It's going to disqualify you if you don't, and that's almost a systemic checkbox that you don't want to miss.
Okay, Oscar, this one's for you. How would a manager show on LinkedIn strong leadership of remote employees, especially across many geographies?
Well, so on LinkedIn, there's several places. One, talk about it in your about section. Talk about it and show examples in your work experience. And when I mean examples is, some kind of a multimedia. Okay, there's different formats. Also, in recommendations, get recommendations for people that can attest that you have those skills. And then the other area is share content or contribute comments in that area of leadership. Because if Thor is talking about, underwater basket weaving constantly, I'm going to assume Thor is an expert on weaving baskets, underwater. Okay, and that's how we can show it on LinkedIn.
Okay, Thor, how important is it being in compatible time zones for remote work, asynchronous or synchronous communication? Are folks open to delay in communicating or delay in responding?
I don't think it's a major issue. I think if you're the employee, I would look at shifting my work hours to correspond to when the corporate office is open. So if you're a 2-hour difference, then yeah, it may suck for you. But if everybody's in the office at 9 a.m., you need to be in the office 7 a.m. your time and, out at 3 o'clock, whereas they're out 5 o'clock. But I would correlate my hours to whatever the dominant group at the office is.
Okay, I'm going to wrap this thing up. I think Sharon gave me the best question. I'm going to ask each of you. I'm going to start off with Yash. 3 top to-do for job seekers today. Yash, go for it.
One is scan through your network on LinkedIn and reach out to them for recommendations. 2, search for what is hot in the industry right now. And 3, apply for it.
I'm going to add on to Yash's number 1, which is reaching out to LinkedIn, because I'm going to quote Oscar and what he says. Use the opportunity. Happy New Year. Make sure to not just go, I need an opportunity, right, Oscar? You always talk about this. Never, ever think about yourself. Always think about the other person and go, how are you? Happy New Year, instead of just doing the ask, right, Oscar?
Yes.
You can expand on that one.
To quickly add on to that, anytime you see it's someone's birthday on LinkedIn, which I'm so glad it notifies you about, reach out to them. That's a great opportunity. Just wish them happy birthday. They don't need to know whether it was via a recommendation from LinkedIn or if you just knew it.
So why didn't I get a happy birthday?
Yeah, Yash, where's mine? Just kidding.
You set yourself up.
I was not looking for a job.
Hey, Oscar, elaborate, please, in case anybody has not gone to one of your seminars.
I'll piggyback on what Yash said. Great tips there. So one is be open. Let people know that you are looking for an opportunity very early in this conversation. We talked about the impact that the pandemic has had, and this is a time where everyone has been impacted. So there's no shame in letting people know that you're looking for an opportunity. The second thing that I also recommend is take some time. If you just recently got laid off, take some time to replenish your soul, because it does take a beating, emotionally and financially, potentially, and so forth. So take some time, maybe a week or so, to lick your wounds and then get back up. And then the third thing is, and something that I strongly believe is, folks, focus on building that brand of yours, because your brand is the foundation to what type of job you're looking for, the type of content you share, who you connect with, and the type of jobs that you're going to be pursuing.
Cool. Yash, wrap this thing up. Top 3 things to do for job seekers right now.
Thor's going to wrap this thing up.
You can go again, Yash, if you'd like.
Oh, sorry.
So I guess it's coming to me then, huh, Cheryl? Taking it home?
Yeah, you're taking it home. You're hitting the home run.
So first, update your resume. It's probably been a while since you've dusted it off and done anything with it. Make sure it's accurate. Search for those key buzzwords. Make sure it represents who you are, what you've accomplished. As Oscar said a while ago, sell yourself. Show your body of work. 2, network. / as part of the networking, dedicate an amount of time that you're actually actively searching. A lot of people, we've talked about this previously, when they get laid off or they're not working, they take a day off. Oh, I'm going to sleep today and relax. I'll start tomorrow. Tomorrow turns into, oh, I'll do it Wednesday. I'll do it Friday. And they get into a rut that they just don't search. So even though you may not be employed at this time, dedicate from 8 a.m. till 10 a.m. I'm going to spend on LinkedIn, networking. I'm going to search for jobs, make a schedule, stick to it. Lastly, research before you do anything. As I said a minute ago, everybody talks about TEXIT and it's great here, but unless you do the research and find out what's right for you, is this the right move? Is this the right company I want to work for? Do I want to change jobs during this pandemic, or do I want to stay in the same field and continue with what I've been doing? Do your research before you jump out. Not that you can't, come back and reverse course, but if you're going to put the effort in, make sure you know all the facts before you jump.
Hey, Oscar, can you wrap up with your don't treat your resume like a gym membership, or don't treat your LinkedIn like a gym membership?
Like, is it? Yeah.
A lot of people are trying to lose weight right now, including myself. So give them the speech.
Yeah, folks. I mean, don't treat LinkedIn like a gym membership. That's what I say. But you know what? Actually, Cheryl, I want to wrap it up with this, and because a large percentage are mid-level folks that are participating or attending this, and it kind of goes back a little bit to what I mentioned about the brand. So, folks, build your brand. What I've noticed, many of my peers that are 40 and older, you have spent many years building the brand of your company, but you neglect your personal brand. And now today you're on the outside looking in, and you're having a midlife crisis because you don't know who you are, trying to figure out. And the truth of the matter is, we know who we are. We don't need to find our voice. We need to have the courage to use our voice.
With that said, thank you so much, Oscar. Thank you so much, Thor. Thank you so much, Yash, for spending your time with us tonight and sharing all your insights. I apologize, you guys, if I wasn't able to get to your questions. There was a lot of people here. And so if you could do me a favor, at the end of this, when you click out, make sure to fill out the survey. There's only 2 questions on there. That helps me out. Put any topics that you want to hear about, because we will be doing a job and career panel in February, and then we're going to be back in March. We want to make sure that you guys stay employed and have a paycheck coming in. So that is my goal for 2021 for everybody. And so hopefully it's your goal as well. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you to my
Thank-
panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cheryl. Josh,
Thank
Thor,
you.
pleasure.
Oscar, great meeting you.
Likewise.
Thank you. And Jean, where were you when we answered that question? I don't know. I don't know where everybody went when we answered some of these questions. Yes, they said it's okay to make a career transition. So yeah, do it. Like Nike, just do it.
Someone reached out to me on LinkedIn saying congratulations on being a new dad. And one, I absolutely appreciate that.
See,
I love the observation there.
That exactly.
I love that. Happened 5 years ago, but the fact that you noticed that on there.
I actually got a text in the middle of this and said, "Is that a picture of Yash on his mug?" So, hey.
But see, that's a great example right there. Yeah, that's a great example of personalizing the message. Keep it human, folks.
Yeah, and can I give a shout out to Yash's son? I mean, like, if you follow Yash on Instagram, I don't know if your Instagram is private or public, but you had a great posting the other day of your son just spraying cologne. You were spraying cologne on your son. It was really cute. Anyways, if you guys personalize it, you guys can personalize it. And so, yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to stay online, just answer any library-related questions, burning library-related questions. No, we're not open. Probably not opening anytime soon with the pandemic being like, what we at, Oscar? 3% ICU beds?
Yeah, less than that. I just saw about a half hour ago a message. Yeah, I think less than 1%. Yes.
1% ICU beds? Yikes.
Yeah.
You guys, it's very dangerous out there. So please, for those of you guys who are logging off, please stay safe. And yeah, I'll stick around.
You have a question in the panel. What headset are you using?
I think I responded to it, but it's a
I'm sorry, I didn't scroll up yet. Okay.
It's a Jabra Evolve 65. I love this headset.
You know what, Yash? You get a lot of questions about your headset every single time we do a presentation. I think it's like your thing. It's like your shtick.
It's the next one then.
It's the brand I've built apparently, because it happens a lot in my current employer as well. Everyone's asking me questions about it. And I have no idea if it's just because I'm one of the only people that wears it this way. Maybe, I don't know. But I always keep this thing charged. Like, it's just a part of my life. And most people don't use this for that very reason, that it has to be charged.
You're fashion forward, Yash. That's what it is.
That's awesome. So,
okay. Thank you so much for your comments, you guys. Thank you so much. We'll be back soon. Yes. February 1st, we'll be back. And then, I forgot to mention, Albert from Albert's Jobless and Referrals will be back on Monday, I believe January 25th. He'll be back to talk about resumes and how to get those souped up, because he's done a lot of mock resumes and mock interview sessions. And so he's going to be talking about best practices for that. So you definitely want to, that one's already on Eventbrite. So you guys can go ahead and sign up now.
Awesome.
And shout out to Sue Connolly, in case Sue Connolly's still here. Thank you so much for pinging it out to the kit list. I love you so much. Thank you.
Woo-hoo. All right. Well, I'm going to be logging off, everyone. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank
Josh,
you, Oscar.
Thor. Appreciate you guys. Love
nice
you guys.
Meeting you, Oscar.
Yes.
Nice meeting you, Oscar. Let's connect soon.
Yes. Okay. Bye-bye.